We are a compact group, and we can hold our talk here. So we are ready to start now. This event is a part of the dialogue Clean Planet for All. Mr. Mauro Petriccione is participating in the dialogue. He is Director General for Climate Action. Clean Planet for All is the topic of this dialogue. The EU provided data showing that 93% of the citizens EU find the climate change as a problem. In November last year, the European Commission proposed its strategic vision, strategic long-term vision for prosperous, modern, competitive, and climate-neutral EU economy until by 2050. This vision covers almost all policies of the EU. I don't doubt that the people here are interested in this topic. Thank you for being here. The organizers, the Citizens Dialogue from the liaison office and the team of Mr. Petriccione have included various ways of participation in this dialogue. One is the Slido platform, where you can register with your smartphones. You can ask questions here in the hall, and those who cannot, who do not participate in this dialogue physically, can use the Twitter or the office, the European Parliament office the website in order to participate in the dialogue. Now, officially, let us greet let us welcome Mr. Mauro Petriccione, Director General of DG Clima. Dear sir, you have already had various meetings with various representatives of Bulgarian institutions. Why is it important for you to be here in Sofia? In order to hear something important, or in order for you to say something that Bulgaria has to take into account and think over? You have the floor, sir.
Many thanks, Sabrina, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be in Sofia and to have this kind of discussion, this kind of interaction with all of you. I'm not going to make a long introduction. I'm not going to make a long introduction of how serious climate change is as a problem. Let me just make a personal note in that respect. I've been in this job for 18 months. And before that, climate change for me was a big bad things happening somewhere that hopefully somebody was dealing with. It took me a couple of months in this job looking at facts and figures to start getting really scared about what's happening. And I think a lot of people are extremely worried and conscious that this is probably the most serious problem that we have faced for a generation. I've sometimes compared it with my generation growing up with the threat of nuclear war. We were really worried that that would happen. Not that the threat has completely disappeared, but we've managed it. I think a lot of people, especially young people, feel that this is a threat of the same caliber. Now, in Europe, we do have a very large consensus that this is a problem, that we need to do something, and then that Europe should do its part and should lead in fighting climate change. Science tells us that it needs to be stopped in the second part of the century in order not to go beyond what's tolerable, and the developed countries, developed nations should take the lead, should be the first. We have had a long-standing policy on climate change. We've had targets for 2020, which we're about to reach. We have legislated targets for 2030, but last year we were asked to produce a strategy for the longer term. Where are we going after 2030? Where is it that Europe really wants to be, and what is our part in persuading the rest of the world that we need to work together to stop climate change. So the Clean Planet for All was the answer. As the title says, it's beyond a climate policy strategy. We also need to improve our economy. We need to become more competitive, not just for the sake of it, but because we want to be a more prosperous society, a more fair and better society to live in. And we need a working economy for that, but we also need a clean economy. This is a big project. This is politicians often talk about generational challenges, but a project by which we want to change the structure of our economy over 30 years is a generational challenge, and we didn't think that this could be decided according to the ordinary institutional processes. So we have encouraged and invited member states to launch national debates to discuss this not only within governments, with parliaments, but also with civil society, with all actors, and with any interested citizen. And we are trying to do a little bit to contribute to that, and that's why I'm here. I've seen the government this morning, I've seen a good selection of the parliament, very solid discussion, and I'm interested in seeing what the people who are not professionally involved in this think about it, and what can we do to answer. Our objective is by 2050, and this is a gradual process, but it's a relatively fast one, to have clean energy, to clean the way we produce goods and services, to make sure that agriculture is environmentally sensitive, and that we have clean mobility, and we think that we have the time to do it, but we don't have time to waste. Because at the same time, these changes are big changes, and some people's lives will be disrupted. And we also have to have the instrument to help those who are more affected by the transformation to reap more opportunities. Life is a process of change. This is not a big one, but I think it is our duty to make sure that any transition is managed with an eye to the people who are involved and not just to the big numbers. Ulrina, I think I will leave it here. Happy to give any detail anybody would like.
Благодаря ви много. Сега е време да тестваме вашето мнение на първи.
It is the first question in Slido. Do you think that your voice is heard in Europe? Could you please respond to this question, and we will see the results.
I take this opportunity, until we wait for the results, to thank the interpreters because they play an important part in all this endeavor. Otherwise, nothing could happen. Mr. Petriccione, do you participate often in meetings like that with European citizens? And what are the usual answers, yes or no? Do citizens feel heard by the European institutions? What's your feeling? What's your understanding of this issue?
I can't give you a scientifically valid answer. I give you my own impression. And the impression I have is that yes, but it's never enough. What I hear always, even people who say that they are being heard, they want more. They want more dialogue, they want more discussion. And of course, there's never enough time to have all the dialogues that the one should. But my team runs a very good system of communication. We work with, we produce materials for schools, for organizations, trying to explain what we're doing and why. I think that's extremely important.
Сега в бързия тест на този въпрос тук в залата.
A quick test of this question, the responses are no, the majority is no. Now you have the floor for more questions. Clean Planet for All is a very ambitious vision. Could you please introduce yourself? I'm sorry, I cannot hear the question. Just hold on a second, please. Dimitar Kumanov is my name. I'm from Sofia. My question is the following. In fact, it refers to the rule of law in Europe and its application in Bulgaria. The rule of law is not abided by in Bulgaria. I believe that the entire audience can tell you what happens in Bobovdol, in Golubovo, in Ruse, because the air is very polluted there due to illegal burning of waste and other debris. And currently, air pollution is promoted by all means by the government. And at the same time, the European Union continues to pour funds regarding environmental protection, but the majority, or at least 50% of the money, are going into the wrong hands for the wrong purposes. So my question is, how do you feel being in one of the most corrupted countries in Europe, sir? Can you please comment, Mr. Petriccione, on this?
The obvious answer is that we do care about the rule of law everywhere. And the rule of law is many things. It is, you know, applying the law is not always easy, and there is insufficient enforcement in many places. But when the will to enforce the law is missing, the situation gets much worse. We care about that. We have instruments in the treaty to handle that. I think you're very aware of what the European Union and the Commission as an instrument of the European Union is doing. How do I feel being in Bulgaria? I think there are issues in Bulgaria. We've been very public about them, but we are not shied away. At the same time, why shouldn't I be here? Why should I be uncomfortable in coming to Bulgaria? Everywhere, no matter how serious the problems are, the majority of people are law-abiding, and the majority of people want to have a discussion about the things that they care about, and that's why I'm here. I know that there are problems of enforcement of air quality laws in Bulgaria. There are problems elsewhere. Maybe some of them are worse here than in other places. But what I'm here today is to have a discussion with all those who are interested in what do we do collectively to improve the situation, because no matter how good our laws are on the environment and climate, we who have proposed those laws are acutely aware of the fact they're not sufficient. We're acutely aware of the fact that we need more. But how do we get more in a way that brings everybody on board? It's a good thing. That's why I'm here. So I feel perfectly comfortable being in Bulgaria. We will continue to criticize anything that is there to be criticized, but that's not a reason for staying away.
Заповядайте за още въпроси от залата.
You have the floor for more questions now. Could you introduce yourself? Daniela Pandurska. I represent NGO, Foundation Zelenika. I have two questions to Mr. Petriccione. You, from the European Commission, and not only you, but all the institutions of the European Commission, you travel a lot, and you travel by plane. We all know how big pollutants are airplanes. And along with the shipping industry, airplanes are the largest polluters. What do you intend to do about this? Second question, a rise in temperature in the planet is associated with a loss of wildlife. This year, a report was published that stipulates 50% of the wild population had been lost. There are some habitats that are very hard to restore or impossible to restore. What do you intend to do about that? Mr. Petriccione, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Actually, the biggest polluter is not airplanes, is electricity. Do you switch off the light? Do you live in the dark? Yes, you switch off when you leave the home. Do you live in the dark? Look, I travel by plane. I cannot do my job if I travel on foot. The question is, we have a modern, technologically advanced society. The way we've built that society is dirty. Can we clean it? But I don't think that you will have many people agreeing that the way to clean that society is to abandon modern technology. We can clean our society with technology. We can also, and there I'm with you, reduce our footprint by doing things not doing things which are unnecessary. The question is, we should all ask ourselves, if we take a plane, is why do I do it? Do I need it? Is there a good reason? So it's not black and white, and that's part of the problem. If we put things in black and white, we'll never find consensus on something. We have to go to the roots of things. We use and waste a lot of energy. Do we have to? Is it necessary? Cars pollute a lot more than planes. How much do we drive? And honestly, I'm not telling you, I do miracles. I have a new car, and the person who gave me that car knew what I was doing and said, well, in your position, you must have an electric car. I never thought about that. And it all, I'm Italian, I like cars. It dawned on me that the least I could do is to change my habit. Now, electric cars aren't a miracle solution, but they help. We need to change fundamentally the way our society works. We need to clean our energy supply. We need to clean the product we use. But we still want to live in a modern society and a technologically advanced one. The good news is that we do have the technologies. The question we should ask is, why are they not being deployed? What's missing? Why are not we using cleaner techniques? And why are we wasting so much? Because one of the conditions that we've been very clear about, if we want to have climate neutrality in 2050, is to cut our energy consumption by 50%, not continue to increase it. The moment it continues to increase every day, We need to cut our energy consumption by 50% over the next 30 years if we want to succeed, and we think it's perfectly possible. Biodiversity is the other big challenge of our time, and it's not unrelated to climate change, as you know very well. Climate change is not the only reason for the loss of biodiversity, but it's a big factor in it. Which is why this Commission has tried to bring all these strands together. When President von der Leyen speaks about the Green Deal, and when she has appointed a Vice President in charge of the Green Deal, that deal has many strands. One is climate policy, one is a biodiversity strategy. And yes, it is true, we have had very ambitious objective in halting and reversing biodiversity loss, and we have not been very successful at that. I think there is a need for a very drastic step up in what we do to stop biodiversity loss. And that's why we're bringing together all the strands of climate and environment policy, bringing together industrial policy, technology, education. Because as we were saying earlier, we need to change the way we act, but in order for people to change their habits, you have to educate them, you have to explain them.
Един въпрос, който събира все по...
There is a question that becomes increasingly popular in this hall. We can see this in Slido. It has to do with the national plans of the member states regarding coping with climate change. How can citizens get information as to the extent to which countries are coping with these changes? And another important issue, Mr. Petriccione, has to do with the communication strategy. The vision is ambitious, it is extensive, it covers almost all sectors of the EU policies. But the question is, what will be the success rate of this campaign? How much more will we learn about what the European institutions are doing and what is being done on a national level?
Thanks. Let me start with your last question, with your second question. You know, I don't think that the big problem is how much member states are communicating about what they're doing on climate. I think the problem is how much they're actually doing. Because once they do things, everybody is happy to communicate what they're doing. Well, depends on what you're doing. Some things people tend to keep hidden, but if anybody is taking action on climate change, you will know. If you don't know, then you should ask yourself, is anything happening? Is enough happening? Again, Europe works only when everybody does their part. You know, there are no miracles to be achieved in Brussels if they're not reflected in what happens on the ground, and sometimes means in member state, sometimes means at the local level. In terms of helping citizens monitor and see that, we're doing what we can to ensure transparency. And now I come to the national plans. The regulation that establishes those plans, for instance, obliges member states to organize a process of public consultations around those plans. I'm not saying everybody has done it and everybody has done wonders. There has been a lot of variability. On the other hand, the fact that you're asking questions means you know about those plans. We've made those plans public. This time we haven't even asked member states, can we, it's your plans, can we publish it? We went ahead. We've been publishing what the Commissioner recommended to member states. We'll publish the final plans. What we can do and what we should do is to be as transparent as possible on anything that arrives in Brussels and encourage, oblige, persuade member states to be more transparent And transparency isn't a goal, you achieve it and then you're happy. Transparency is a process. And put it this way, the day our citizen would stop asking questions about transparency, I would get very worried. Because that means that something has gone wrong. Now, what can we do on the plans themselves? We are waiting now to see what the final plans are and how well our recommendations have been incorporated. We have some good news from some member states, less good news from others, we'll see. But these plans have a 10 years value. They are meant to give us the results for 2030, so they will be monitored constantly. There will be more information, and I think people, organizations, citizens, NGOs, businesses, they should keep an eye on this. And if they don't find them publicly in their country, they'll find them publicly in Brussels. The information is on our website. We live in a world where you don't have to rely on direct contact to get your information. And we do expect citizens to continue to push for these things to be improved. It's a big part of it.
Thank you.
Добър ден.
Цветелина Стоянова, professional researcher and active citizen. I read your strategy before I came. I think that this is a very good, these are very good formulations. The idea is how the goals would be achieved. Last year, I managed a project held in 28 countries among citizens. The major concerns of European citizens is that European institutions are not sufficiently active. There is a lot of wishful thinking, but when it comes to action, they are not sufficiently effective, or they are at least slow. If you should be aware that you should support the active citizens on the spot, not only our transparency questions. Let me give you an example. Matters will remain in such good brochures, and I would recommend that you don't print them out because we're killing trees in this way. But I think that there is an issue that is missing in this strategy, namely the role of trees on our planet. Whatever we do, trees are those that cope with CO2 and with temperature. By focusing on trees, you can solve most of the questions. The problem is that in this country, EU funds are used for under the pretext of creating renewable sources, and we are killing trees. If there is a hot line where active citizens can alert you, this will be very good. You'll say we cannot interfere, but if you remember what happened in Africa, where aid was airlifted and people that collected it from the ground actually resold this aid. Can you please ask your question? My question is, what is the mechanism of supporting or aiding active citizens on your part? Active citizens, but also active communities, as other people in the hall supplement.
There are no papers, there are no trees in that paper copy, just to be clear. It's probably rags. But if the part of your comment is we're not doing enough, of course we're not doing enough. It's never going to be enough until we're finished. So I have no problems with being told that we're not doing things enough and we are not doing them fast. I think hearing this is, we need to hear it. Our political bosses need to hear this because we do need to do more and faster. We also need to do things together. We also need to bring everybody on board. The beautiful things about the European Union is that we have 28 countries. The problem with the European Union is that we have 28 countries. And when we manage to bring them together, we can do wonderful things, but it is a very painful and difficult process to do so. So, yes, we will always be too slow or slower than we ought to be, and I have no problem in hearing it and accepting that criticism. We are trying to do more. As I said earlier, we have just finished passing legislation to achieve objective in 2030. The new president of the Commission is already saying that's not good enough. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go fast enough. And we're going to look at that again to increase the ambition. The trees issue, be careful. That is a moral hazard in that. To say that by planting trees you solve most problems, you give a very wonderful excuse to people to continue to pollute. We do need to plant more trees, but in Europe we're not doing badly. In the past 10 years we've added a forest cover the size of Greece to Europe's forest. True that things are going badly where it matters even more. In primary forests, in the Amazon, in Africa, in the forest. And our ability to stop that is not what it is in Europe. But important as trees and carbon sinks are, and you do find that in our strategy, fundamentally we have to stop producing energy, things, services in a very intensive way based on fossil fuels. The two things have to go together. You can't, it is absurd to say that we don't need more nature-based solution, but it's very dangerous to say that nature-based solutions are the solution, because that gives an excuse for others not to act. And we've been trying to give a balanced message that doesn't leave anybody hiding. Now, we're all good at hiding, aren't we? It's not because we've said it on that piece of paper that it will happen automatically. Now, your point on what mechanisms. Look, there isn't a hotline, any of the 500 and, I don't know, 50 or 60 million European citizens, I forget how many we are these days, can pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, there is a problem. Even if we had it, the European institutions do not have the ability to police everything. There are a number of initiatives where citizens and their organization can make their voice heard, and we do hear them. We do hear them regularly from citizens. Our addresses are public. There are mailboxes in all the Commission services receiving citizens' view. We spend a lot of time receiving them and going through them. We have an obligation to answer every single one of them. Many are very helpful. Some of them are interesting, but perhaps a bit less helpful. But we have an obligation to answer everybody. But the important thing is, I'm sorry, I know where the question comes from, but if we don't have a system that works at all levels in Europe, Europe will not work. So much of the action, if you're Bulgarian and you have a problem with the way Bulgaria is going, nothing can substitute action here on the ground, which is not a way to say that the European Union cannot and should not help. But Europe is not a panacea. It's not a miracle solution. And we don't want to be miracle makers. We want to be part of a system of democracies, and some of them work better than others.
Благодаря ви. Сега да ви помоля да отговорим. Първо ще тестваме мнението на втория.
Now, let's see the second question. Do you believe that the European Union is doing enough to reduce harmful emissions, and is it doing enough? Please vote. Thank you very much. Mr. Petriccione, yet again, we have predominated negative answers. I'm not competent in this topic, but obviously it is necessary to discuss more and more the topic, and especially the long-term vision of the European Union, because I believe the new vision is not well promoted across Europe. Could you please tell us about the most important objectives of your vision? And I would prefer the audience to keep silent.
That answer doesn't surprise me. I just said it. Of course we're not doing enough. It doesn't mean that we're not doing things. We're doing a lot. We're doing a lot more than anybody else in the world. Our objective is also to show the rest of the world what can be done. And the fact that you can fight climate change and have a competitive economy, you can fight climate change and create jobs, you can help those whose jobs have to change their job. We want to show the world that you can do all these things and see whether we persuade them to do the same. But of course we're not doing enough, no matter how much you do. The outgoing Commission has done a massive amount of work on climate change. 15 pieces of legislation, from reducing pollution in industry, energy generation, CO2 standards for cars. It's not enough. The job is unfinished. And we mustn't stop, and we're not stopping. At the end of its mandate, this Commission has put forward a 2050 objective. Why? And that's the most important message from that strategy, is because we have to stop thinking short term. We need to move to thinking in long-term, systemic terms. It's difficult, you know, human mind is not made to think in systems. We think concrete, we think today, we think what's happening to us. But we need to think in terms of how we change our entire society, and you can't do it only bottom up. You have to have a top-down part of the approach. You have to know where you're going, because otherwise you may take the wrong path to get there. That's the most important element of this, and this applies to very concrete things. What measures do member states adopt to renovate buildings? Do they need to renovate a chunk of buildings so that they achieve their targets? Or do they set up policies that can be continued for the next 30 years until we finish renovating our buildings? There's a big difference in that. Investors are going to invest in new industrial plants, new job, different jobs. Which ones? Same as today? Power with fossil fuels? Or are they going to invest in clean technologies? Are we going to move from coal, oil and gas to electricity and hydrogen? How do we do it? You know, we need to have that kind of long-term perspective. Now, The other point on we're not doing enough, we need to keep an eye on ourselves. As I said, this commission has done a tremendous amount of work. Be honest, my colleagues and I were looking forward to say, okay, well, let's calm down a little bit and implement this legislation. We have a new boss who has come in and first thing she said is, well, actually, no, we haven't done enough. Let's get working again for bigger targets, faster changes, and we've started working again on that. So, again, the day people say you've done enough, either we've stopped climate change or we have a problem.
To go on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice. Maybe later.
Благодаря ви, шегувам се, разбира се. Имаше, понеже сам засегнах.
You touched upon the topic that we need very specific examples and very concrete in order for people to understand the links between various actions and EU objectives. So here we have a very specific question. Whether the ETS applies to the construction sector. And this question comes from Desislava.
Okay. I don't actually know the final answer to that question. I can tell you what I think now, but please, take it with some caution. The president, she's talking about construction. Yes, we're talking about buildings, of course. We're talking about the energy efficiency of buildings. We're talking about what it takes and the way they're heated or cooled. But, it could mean anything else. It could mean the construction sector as an industry. What products do they make? How do they make them? How do they make windows? How do they make pipes? How do they make insulation materials? How clean is that production sector? And how much does it contribute to make our buildings more efficient, healthier? Because it's not as simple. You can insulate a building completely, make it more energy efficient, and then you suffocate in it. It could mean a lot more things. That's what we are busy with now, and it will keep us busy for a while to figure out what does construction in the ETS mean. We also have to figure out what does it actually do. How much does bringing construction into the ETS reduce emissions, and is the effort worth what we get as a result? President has been very clear. She wants ambition. She would like to have at least 50%. She would prefer 55%. But she also said, first we assess the economic, the environment, and the social impact of what we propose. We don't go blindly without thinking, and we do it in a responsible way. So it will take us a little while to figure it out, but we figured these things out in the past. We'll do it this time as well.
Thank you. Заповядайте за въпроси. Заповядайте, добър ден.
Здравейте, аз съм Данита Заречи.
Good afternoon. I represent an NGO. Zornica is my name. About burning waste. Last year, the DG Regio said that after 2020 there will be no projects funded regarding burning of waste. And at the same time, in Sofia, there is a project of 100 million about waste incineration. Since very long, we have addressed the issue to the European Commission, and we usually get a response, don't worry about it. The responsible institutions will take care of the issue, but we still remain concerned. We wanted to have less harmful emissions and a better climate. And waste is something that contributes very much to air pollution. So we support a project regarding waste incineration. So what do you think about such a situation and such a project?
I don't know the detail of the project, so I'm not going to be able to give you a very precise answer. First of all, there is a reason why we are no longer going to finance waste incineration. And the reason, you know it perfectly well, and we agree on that. I don't know whether we are co-financing this project, whether it's an older project that needs to be completed, whether we have made legal commitments under the old rules and we have to abide by them. I don't know, it could be any of these things. The fact is that waste incineration per se is not a policy we're keen to support. Apart from the fact that in the kind of economy that we envisage, waste should no longer be treated as waste, but as a resource. We're not going to solve our problems by using waste as an input for energy generation or for anything else, but it's one of the many things that could help. So there are many reasons for not supporting simply incinerating and spewing out in the air the result. This particular project, if you need more details, my colleagues here in the representation would be happy to, if they don't have the details themselves, to ask my colleagues in DG region and bring them back. I can't tell you anything more meaningful than that without knowing the details.
Благодаря ви. Заповядайте, добър ден. Още един въпрос от залата.
One more question from the audience.
From Helsinki, Bulgaria. I put my question in written, but I also want to ask it to be sure that it will be answered. Addressing the carbon at the border, what it be, as you see it, whether it will be a commercial policy measure, like a custom duty, or an environmental measure as a carbon tax? How do you foresee it at the European Commission level? Thank you.
If I had that kind of crystal ball,
Ако мога да ви отговоря на този въпрос, трябва да имам една стъклена сфера пред себе си, в която да гадая. През по-голяма част от
for very many reasons. What I can say on this one is that the President has made a commitment. She has not left, if maybe under certain conditions, she has said, I will propose a carbon border tax. Now, I don't think she will change her mind, so I think we will soon get an instruction to get working on that. We're already looking at it. You obviously know about the subject, but you've laid out the two main avenues. And what I can say is it's way too soon to make that choice. What you need to also to bear in mind is that depending on, I think we all know that these measures can be designed in a way that makes them legitimate. But the problem has always been to make them work in practice. Lack of data, lack of knowledge, of detailed knowledge. And as we solve that problem, that may also have an influence on what is the legal form, and therefore what's the legal basis. In our term, either of those measures will be decided by qualified majority. Member states may disagree. On these kind of issues, member states have often unanimously told the Commission that this is a tax measure and they're going to decide by unanimity, if they're going to decide. So all I can say is that you will see a Commission proposal. You will not see immediately, but we will be told to speed it up. And there will be clearly a big debate on this one. And when we make a proposal, we make an impact assessment, and the impact assessment contains public consultation to which everybody has access, and people are increasingly using this opportunity. In fact, the problem is that nowadays when the replies run in the tens of thousands, we consider ourselves lucky. We've had public consultation with replies in the order of 150 to 100,000 replies, and I can tell you, just figuring out what people are saying is a big job. But never mind. It shows that people are interested, and we love that. So you will see a lot more of this in the coming future, sooner rather than later.
Mr. Petriccione, one question from Slido regarding waste incineration. There is a related question. Can you give an example of a country that is successfully transforming its economy from a fossil-based economy to a carbon-free economy without serious challenges? We have a vision up to 2050, and we need to compete among, the competition should take place among countries. Can you tell us which is the country that is most close to the objectives of 2050?
2050 is a big objective for everybody. But there are a number of our member states who are doing very well on the development of alternatives to fossil fuels. They all have their problems. Very different. Germany, doing very well on wind power, especially in the north of Germany. In fact, they have too much wind power. They don't quite know what to do with it, because one of the bottlenecks is storage. Also, Germany never thought that its energy would come from the north, and it needs more infrastructure to move electricity from north to south. That's been planned. There's massive investment foreseen, national and European. But Germany still has a problem because it has a large coal production, and you cannot shut it down overnight, and Germany is abandoning nuclear as well. Very different situation. My country, Italy. Italy has abandoned nuclear power, they've been closed, and it's now closing down coal plants. Their solution at this stage is natural gas. The next step to replace natural gas is mostly solar production, for somewhat obvious reasons. But that doesn't happen overnight. So the Italian choice has been use gas as a transition technology, even though gas is imported. There's little or no gas in Italy, but plan the replacement later on. So you can't say there is a country who is a perfect model. There is a number of solutions. They are working. Wind and solar are becoming very cheap and competing with fossil fuels very happily.
Благодаря ви. Заповядайте. Вървим към последните минути. Заповядайте.
Thank you. Natalia Dimitrova, Blue Link Foundation. Mr. Petriccione, I'd like to refer you back to something you mentioned in the beginning of this dialogue, that traditional power sector is one of the sectors that contributes most to air pollution. We also talked a lot about active citizens and active communities contributing with their example on their own to the attainment of the carbon neutral economy by 2050. One of the objectives is 80% of the electricity should come from renewable energy sources. Along these lines, how do you see and what measures do you suggest to support the energy independence of citizens and cooperatives? In Bulgaria, if you want to use solar voltaic on your own, it will take you about 12 months, and you will have to address a lot of institutions as if you're opening a nuclear station. In some countries, like in Finland, for example, it takes very little time. You have to just address an agency that will which will check whether your roof is adequate, and then you need to address the local authorities. What do you think about this, Mr. Petriccione?
An excellent question, because it opens a big can, not of worms in this case. It's a can where you can find interesting things inside. I mean, first of all, I hope it takes longer than 12 months to authorize a nuclear reactor. That strikes me as being too short. But first of all, let me start with that. That is a problem we've identified in many countries. And it goes from the installation from a household to large industrial installation. I had in my office the head of a very large energy company in Europe who was almost entirely converted to renewables. And that's one of the things they were complaining about. You know, if we want to open a solar field, it's more complicated than opening a nuclear reactor. That's not acceptable. I agree, it's not acceptable. That is one of the areas where we need to work on, and we are reflecting on what can we do. Because at the end of the day, you know, we cannot legislate everything under the sun in Europe. But how can we help and do something useful to speed up administrative procedures? And I can tell you, having looked at it for my own house, that complications are not a Bulgarian specialty. Many are good at complicating our life. The 80% in the strategy, that's an expectation. Because we expect that a number of countries will stick to nuclear power as a source of CO2 energy. It's, you know, we know it's controversial. We know that in many countries, citizens don't want to hear about nuclear power. As you know, in the European system, member states decide what energy they want. What we can do is to make clear what the consequences of not having clean energy are. Make clear that without clean energy, the objective the member states have agreed to will not be reached, and help invest in what it takes for clean energy. So we have very important European investment in clean technology. We have the possibility to invest more in new technologies. You know, wind power nowadays is no longer a new technology, but we are investing in floating wind power. We are investing in having wind power in mountain areas because the space in Europe is what it is, and you can't put windmills on everybody's balcony. We are also working on seeing what can we do to help the diffusion of energy production. We have a system today which is based on very centralized production, mostly with fossil fuels or with nuclear, and diffuse utilization of energy everywhere. We're not going to be able to change that 100%, but it's not sustainable. We will not have one big, fantastic source of energy that replaces fossil fuels and helps us keep the same model. We need to rebalance the energy system towards producing more energy locally. If you look at farms and the reuse of biomass, you're not going to be able to feed a city with that. But you are going to be able to feed a small rural district around a cooperative of farmers or around large animal husbandry installations. So solar panel, you've mentioned, the individual homeowners, that lightens the burden on the grid, and where countries have done that decisively, this is working. Solar power is important in Germany, and Germany isn't exactly the sunniest place on our continent. It is important in Denmark because the right policies have been adopted. We will continue to try and encourage and finance, at least in part, these policies, and to finance research and deployment of these technologies. Then we also need the energy industry to invest, and that's why it's important to have very tough targets in terms of renewables. We are very close to the 2020 targets. Some member states who've missed them are now rushing to catch up and investing more. The targets for 2030 are very challenging, and will oblige member states to invest more in renewable energy if they want to meet those targets. Today, the technology of choice is wind and solar, with a bit of biomass. But there is investment in all sorts of other things, and we must be able to use all of them, not bet only on one source to replace fossil fuels.
Thank you. Господин Petriccione, ние сме в
Thank you, Mr. Petriccione. We've come almost to the end of this citizen dialogue. I'd like to share something with you. While I was getting ready for this meeting, and when I saw that 93% of the Europeans are worried about climate change and how we are to cope with them, there was a statement there that the Bulgarian community is one of those that were least interested in the measures regarding climate change. And I'm very happy that this hour we spent together has shown us, I believe it has shown you and me that this is not so. We have these specific examples too. You had meetings with the Bulgarian politicians and with the communities, civil communities. What, in your opinion, is the big challenge for Bulgaria so that it can become a climate-neutral economy? Can you tell us a few words by way of a wrap-up? Thank you.
Look, Bulgaria is a good example of why doing things collectively in Europe is a good idea and is necessary, because we cannot all move at the same pace. The Bulgarian economy has inherited more challenges than some other member states have. Not the only one, plenty of challenges everywhere else, and unevenly distributed among member states. If you look at Bulgaria, you have traditional energy generation based mostly on coal and a bit of nuclear, not your ideal starting point. You have an industrial fabric which still has legacy issue from the past and still needs renewal and investment in a world where competition is tough. So what Bulgaria needs is more investment, more determination to create an environment in which investors want to come, needs plan and help in eventually transitioning out of coal. Of course, the notion of switching off coal overnight in Bulgaria doesn't make sense. But the notion of using coal forever doesn't make much sense either. How do you move from A to B? How can we help There are European instruments to help. They're not going to solve the problem. Cohesion funds can be used. Bulgaria is a big beneficiary. According to the European Commission proposals for the new budget, Bulgaria's benefits would increase, whereas others will decrease. There is also a need of rebalancing depending on what are the challenges now as opposed to 10 years ago. We are working on finding new instruments to help what is now being labeled the just transition. It's very clear that we're not going to be able to do the energy and climate transition that we must do without taking everybody with us. And everybody means people who today, whose immediate interest goes against that transition. How do you persuade them if you don't take care of their interest? For President von der Leyen, just transition is going to be an essential part of a Green Deal. You cannot have a Green Deal without a social aspect. We have instruments in the European Union. They're not perfect. It's not as if we've done miracles so far, but we have done a lot of good things in this respect, and we can continue to do that.
Thank you so much. Благодаря на Мауро Петричоне за това, че беше.
Thank you, Mr. Mauro Petriccione, for being part of this citizens' dialogue. Thank you all for your questions and for the opinions you have shared to make this a good, substantial dialogue. Thank you all, and I wish you